Good evening, everyone, and welcome into the WST Postgame reaction. My name's Connor Hrabchak. In a moment, I'll be joined by Lyss Houde, and together we're breaking down the Winnipeg Jets' 4-3 win over the New Jersey Devils. They, got off to a bit of a slow start. We'll break it down, but the second period was really where Winnipeg won this game. Some tense moments in the third as the Devils made it 4-3 with a minute 46 remaining. Connor Hellebuyck had to make a save or two after that with the net empty as well, but the Jets get the much needed 2 points, and they kick off their 4-game road trip with a win against the New Jersey Devils. So we're going to break it all down. Scott O'Neill did speak after the game to the media. Ken Wiebe, the Winnipeg Free Press, was there, and we have his thoughts as well from this one. Lyss, your thoughts from tonight's 4-3 win over the Devils?
Yeah, unfortunately, maybe it's just a characteristic of me and who I am and how I view things, but my first impression of that game, the New Jersey Devils are bad, man. I think it was definitely not the best showing that we've ever seen from them and that they've probably ever seen from themselves. It is kind of similar to other Eastern Conference opponents this season where the Jets saw them not too long ago. So it's in our recent memories what that game kind of looked like. I made a tweet to start the game that was like, man, if I had a nickel for every single time a slightly overpaid player on the New Jersey Devils was held out for roster management reasons against the Winnipeg Jets and caused a bit of an uproar on Twitter in the last month, I'd have 2 nickels, which is kind of odd, it being Dougie Hamilton when the Devils were in Winnipeg, and then Andre Palat getting traded mid-game tonight. But all that's to say, there were a lot of kind of lapses and breakdowns on both sides of this game tonight, but there were definitely more of them that I saw from the New Jersey Devils, and ultimately becomes a game that the Winnipeg Jets come out on top of.
For sure. And we'll break down the Winnipeg Jets goals from this game, but a lot of them, they just have so much room. Like Cole Koepke and Alex Iafallo had a 2-on-0 on Cole Koepke's goal. The first goal of the game for Winnipeg, which we'll get to right off the top here, was a bad line change where they had so much room to make multiple passes in the slot and take a 1-0 lead. And that was both sides were turning the puck over and making mistakes in the first period. I think the Jets cut down on it big time in the second period. They went up to a 4-1 lead. The Devils made it 4-2. And then the third period, obviously, the Devils were pressing. They got 1 goal, but not enough to tie it and send it to overtime. But the first 20 minutes of this game, there were a million turnovers on both sides. Both goalies were good, honestly, to start things off. And then I really thought the Jets took things over in the second period. And it's worth noting, Lyss, that the first goal of the game, it's Vilardi to Kyle Connor to Mark Scheifele. And the line didn't start that way in this game, but it ended that way. They reunited the top line, Scott O'Neill did, Vilardi going back up. There was a few moments where, Vilardi gets out for that extra or early change, I should say, and they score a goal. And then the Devils' goal in the first period is a bad shift from that line. Iafallo with the last turnover that ends up in the back of the net. So to start the second period, Iafallo goes down to the fourth line, Vilardi up to the top line, and Pearson up to the second line. What did you think of them reuniting Connor, Scheifele, Vilardi? And then when they did reunite them for the back half of that game, I mean, they were pretty good. They were generating a lot of offense.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, I definitely was always of multiple minds when people were arguing about it. But to me, this is a game where I don't mind the choice of the decision, because if that line doesn't get reunited, based on some of the smaller kind of sloppy plays I saw from the Jets over the course of the game, I don't think they win this one, Connor, right? Like that line combined for, their most important kind of goals there, that first one to kick things off. And then, the next one as well to give the Jets the lead once again. And I think that, we were giving the decision-making grief kind of as a community because of the impact on results, where everyone's like, well, it's the only line that's scoring. And the argument was, well, okay, sure, but it's still not enough to win games. So what's the point of, dying on that hill, because it's not kind of helping you do what you think that it should be doing for you. So that was kind of the argument once upon a time when the Jets were in the middle of losing 11 straight games or whatever. But I think that this is a game where, the chemistry that line has at 5-on-4 as well as at 5-on-5. And this little first goal here, and the second goal are very, very similar, actually, in that they're kind of odd man rushes with some gorgeous passing plays from these 3 guys. And in a game like this, if, you see that first goal and you think, holy smokes, these guys are kind of feeling themselves. You know that you can put them back together. And that was always the argument, right? Is like split them up and then you have all these other things that you're trying out, testing out, but you know you have this option to fall back on if you need to score a couple of goals. And so that's kind of what happened in this game to me. I think that if it becomes a permanent fixture and the Jets go back to losing, 5 of every 6 games or whatever, we can start having more conversations. But no one was ever arguing that they can make some pretty special offense together. And, my question will continue to be, what does that mean for Jonathan Toews? What does that mean for Cole Perfetti or whatever you want to argue about? But I think that, this was an example of what this group can do when they get a little bit of extra open ice. And, they're such a cycle team. They love that kind of half-court offense and picking their plays, whatever. But I love watching them off the rush, man. When they have that opportunity they have 3 trigger men on that line, right? So yeah. I think it's pretty cool to watch them pick their best options and not give Jake Allen a whole lot to be able to do on these.
Yeah, I mean, this first one was a very pretty passing play. I want to start with this play on the wall here by Dylan Sandberg. He does a great job boxing out Jesper Bratt, makes a move around Timo Meier, and quickly fires it up to Velarde. And as you see, the bad line change for the New Jersey Devils just springs them for a 3-on-1 that kind of turns into a 3-on-2. Not really, though, because the Devils players are trailing the play. And when that line has room like that, they're able to make those kind of plays, like you said, Lyss. And this was again, their first shift of the game where it started Connor Scheifele Iafallo. And you can see Iafallo's on the ice. He just goes for a change. So this isn't even when they united this line together. This is just an early line change, and all 3 of these guys ended up on the ice. But to start the second period, Gabe Velarde gets on the board with his 20th of the season. This line was actually together for this one. Now, this is a really wonky goal. Cody Glass blocked a shot, number 12 there. You can see him going off the ice. You might be thinking, why is number 12 just completely abandoning the rush? Well, he was hobbled after blocking a shot and had to make his way to the bench. And therefore, I think the Devils were kind of caught off guard by that. You're essentially down a man in that spot, and it works out for a 3-on-2 for the Jets. And as you said, you got 3 trigger men on this line. And Connor and Scheifele have been fighting for the team lead in goals all year long, but it's Velarde that ends up shooting from distance and scoring on this one. A really nice goal for Gabe. And we don't see him score from this far out very often, too. A lot of his goals are right around the crease and those kind of garbage, greasy goals, but a really nice shot from a guy who doesn't score from far away very, very often, and a well-managed 3-on-2 from this line as well. Just quickly moving on to this Cole Koepke goal that I brought up earlier. Just wonky defending from the Devils in this game. I mean, how does the 4th line for the Winnipeg Jets? I know Cole Koepke's got a lot of speed, but they have a 2-on-0 from the center ice line. Siegenthaler kind of presses up on Barron. I don't think he doesn't know, or I don't think he knows that he has no help behind him. And he's kind of pressing up as if like there's a defenseman that's going to cover for him. Meanwhile, the defenseman is just, I think that's Kovacevic, number 8, is way down below the play, and then a forward goes off for a line change. It's just a mess. And it's a great job for the Jets to capitalize on it. And Cole Koepke ends up banging home the rebound for his 5th of the year. Liz, to me, Koepke's a guy that I know the offense wasn't there for him earlier in the season, but now that he's playing well and producing, he's a guy that is off the potential healthy scratch list for me when I'm making my potential Winnipeg Jets lineup. Just the speed, the penalty killing, and now you're even getting some offense from him.
Yeah, I mean, I think we always had the belief that there maybe was a little bit more for that player in terms of the, archetype of a 4th liner as opposed to, just someone who is a former middle sixer who can't really play at that same level of sauce as maybe they once were, as in a, a la Gustav Nyquist, a la Tanner Pearson, whatever. There was always a little bit more motor, a little bit more of that kind of forechecking ability, a little bit of that forechecking decision-making that I see in some of those guys who've carved out pretty good careers for themselves by being impactful 4th liners, where it's like, you kill an extra 10 seconds on the clock by, making a tricky play kind of below the goal line. And you're not creating those, gorgeous on-man rushes all the time necessarily that, Gabe Velarde or Mark Scheifele score on tonight, but you're tiring out the offense and you're, enabling the next line to come on against the tired opposition and all those different things. And, we see that a little bit from Cole Koepke, and his goals are not, snipes. One of his more recent goals was a point blank shot from the circle, and it was like it didn't even come off the ice. Like, it's not like these are high corner, like tricky Connor Bedard releases or anything like that. But that's a play that to me is a mismanagement of whoever is kind of, I think, must be the either center or left winger in the left defense, because they both seem to take Morgan Barron, who is very obviously going to be chipping the puck up. And if you have one guy there, yeah, you kind of rub him out a little bit or whatever it is on the ice, but they have two guys trying to rub him out maybe or something. And then all of a sudden, Alex Iafallo, who's not necessarily the fastest guy in the league, but he's no slouch either, he just gets right around both of them. And yeah, I was so confused as to what was sort of going on that one when I was kind of watching on my periphery at first, because I was like, you see out of the corner of your eye Alex Iafallo kind of tracking back, and you're like, wait, what period is it? Wait, that's the opposition side, because you're seeing two white jerseys coming in towards the net, and you're like, wait a second, that's not a backtrack and regroup. That's an offensive chance. But again, those are the types of things you do have to score. And when it's 2-0, you simply have to score. And that's the most, lazy take, if that's what you want to call it, least analytical that you're going to get from me, whatever you want. But that's the situation in which you got to, have your wits in order to make the most of your chance, and not just go crazy and go, oh my gosh, there's nobody in front of me, I have a breakaway, and lose your mind or whatever you want to call it. And I think they played it really well, and that ended up being a super important goal, obviously, as New Jersey was able to kind of climb their way back into this one in the third.
For sure, and we're kind of following a chronological order for this game with our analysis, so we'll keep it rolling. But the Jets, I thought second period was their best period. They cut down on the turnovers for sure, which they had a lot of in the first, but Hellebuyck stood tall. And then the second period, they were awesome. They were pressuring. The shots on goal at 5-on-5 in that second period were 12-4 in the Jets' favor. The scoring chances were 9-5. So they really controlled the possession, controlled the play in that second period. And then the third period, where, again, score effects maybe are at play when it's a 4-1 game, but with the Winnipeg Jets, we've seen them blow 4-1 games this year. Toronto Maple Leafs game comes to mind. No lead kind of feels safe with this Winnipeg Jets group, and the Devils get that late second period goal. It's not quite to cut it to 1, but it cuts it to 2. Jesper Bratt on the power play makes it 4-2. And then the Devils came into the game last in the NHL in 5-on-5 goals, Lyss. I'm not sure if you knew that, but I think that was on full display really throughout this game. I know they get the 5-on-5 goal earlier off a bad turnover, but the second and third period, I felt like in the general flow of play, they weren't really generating much. The third, obviously a little bit more as the Jets kind of sat back, and then the empty net comes around and it's chances galore. Like for the final 2.5 minutes, the Devils were getting chance after chance after chance. Jets couldn't clear the zone. Connor Hellebuyck had to make a number of huge saves. And one of the saves he didn't make was Nico Hischier, the Devils' leading scorer, getting on the board with 1:46 remaining. And then after that, the Devils had 2 other chances that I can remember off the top of my head that I would classify as, good chances in the middle of the slot. What did you think of the third? And do you think that's more just the Jets sitting back, or was there something to maybe the empty net sequence that you thought maybe swung? Because I don't know. I think I saw it as more the Jets sitting back a little bit. Connor Hellebuyck was awesome, and they kind of squeaked it out at the end.
Yeah, I definitely did see it as a little bit more of score effects than anything else, where, one team is fighting for their lives and one team is just kind of holding on meagerly for their lives. Like, it doesn't really matter kind of as much for the away team that's, sitting on the lead a bit more. But all that's to say, I think what went well for the Jets in the second period was a lot of the little stuff with, Scott O'Neill mentioned their breakouts, and that was something I noticed as well. I thought their neutral zone play looked really good. They had a ton of controlled entries, and then when they were going in to forecheck, it seemed like it was deliberate. It seemed like they were being a little bit more tactful in terms of thinking of where the puck is going to go after the retrieval is won, after the board battle is won, or whatever. And I think that when the intensity ups a little bit from the opposition, you don't have as much time to make those decisions, whether it's the exits, the entries, the retrievals, or whatever the second play is after the kind of play in question. So I thought that was really crisp and sharp in the second period. And then as the intensity sort of started to ramp up for the Devils, I felt that it got a little bit sloppier for the Jets. And maybe, again, it was more so, that's an indictment of maybe the Devils more than anything, that it was easier for the Jets to do so many different nice controlled things in that second period. But I think that, the third period, it would have been interesting to see how that would have gone if the Jets had gone into it with a bit of a smaller lead, if Jersey had scored some more goals earlier in that period or whatever, because I think that, to me, it is a lot of score facts and everything like that. But all that's to say, like, that's a situation that the Jets have found themselves in many a time over the last little bit. And that 4-3 goal with that much time left in the game, I was alarmed. But I feel bad for calling him out because I thought he had a good game. But the thing that stood out for me the most on the empty net goal that Nico Hischier scored was actually, I want to say maybe 15 or 20 seconds before that even happened. I actually thought the Jets were going to be able to clear the zone and go get an empty net goal because Vlad Nemestikov was at the top of the circles. He was like maybe 4 feet south of the blue line, and he had really good body positioning, in my opinion, on Jack Hughes, who was kind of carrying and protecting the puck at the top. And I don't want to take anything away from Jack because he's obviously a phenomenal hockey player and is really good at protecting the puck in his own skillful way. But I thought that all, from my couch, right, where I'm watching, and it's very easy to say, Vlad Nemestikov really just needed to kind of do a little bit more of a reach around, and it felt like he was kind of just following him, doing his duty, as opposed to really going all the way there for the puck. And then that adds to, Jack Hughes is able to get it to wherever he wants to go, or deeper into the zone, or whatever you want to call it. But that, to me, was the prime opportunity in the entire time that the Devils had some sustained ozone pressure with the net empty, that it would have been the best opportunity for the Jets to kind of take that away from them and break up that ozone pressure that they were creating, and they were unsuccessful with that. So that was the one that I kind of circled. Has nothing to do with the specific play. I know that there are players that could, you can talk about Adam Lowry or whoever who could have had Hischier covered on the specific shot, but that was something that stood out to me. And kind of as I was watching it, I was like, if they score here, I'm going to remember that, because that should have come out in that moment.
I'm with you on that. And you know what I remembered just before the goal? Josh Morrissey getting high sticked. I'm not usually I'm not blaming the refs, like whatever, they miss stuff, but I'm not usually a guy that brings up the refs in any particular moment. But like that one was pretty like right in front of the ref, and like kind of a blatant high stick. Again, refs miss everything.
Yeah.
I'm sure there was stuff missed on the Jets on the Jets earlier in the game as well. But I don't know. I thought that was one that they could have called, but swallowed their whistles. And yeah, the Jets still end up getting the win. Anything else you want to touch on this game in particular, Lyss? I think it's fair. We've analyzed this game, and a lot of people will say, well, it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. And to an extent, you're right. Like this win is great, and the Jets will take the 2 points any which way they can get. But the way that this win matters more is if they rattle off 3 more after it and kind of get into a groove and have it be a stepping stone. But in this game in particular, thought Connor Hellebuyck was good. Thought the second period was great. Does it inspire confidence that they'll go into Tampa, Florida, and Dallas on the rest of this road trip and rattle off 3 straight wins? Probably not, given, some of the things we outlined with how the Devils played this game. But to me, it's a game where the Jets, they needed to respond at least emotionally and physically coming out of Scott Arniel's comments on Saturday. And they did that, at least for the opening 40 minutes. And then the last 20, like we said, maybe a little bit of score effects, maybe sitting on the lead a little bit. But that's natural when you're kind of winning 4-2 in a game like that. Lyss, anything else before we get to the hardest working Jet?
No, let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's get right into it. We've got the standout stat coming up where we'll dive into the numbers from this game. But first, let's get to the hardest working Jet.
The hardest working Jet.
The hardest working Jet of the game. We give out the hard hat here on the WST Postgame reaction. Some standout performances from tonight's game. So I think there's a decent pool of players to choose from. Lyss, who's your hardest working Jet from tonight's game?
Yeah, I think a player who had probably one of the highest impacts on the game, if not the highest, that hasn't been brought up yet in our post game is Connor Hellebuyck, and I'm going to give him my selection of the hardest working Jet. I think that in that third period in particular, there were quite a few chances that were created by the New Jersey Devils. He only let in 1 goal at 5-on-5. Obviously, one of the goals was that 6-on-5 where the pressure was just being absolutely thrown down, and Nico Hischier gets a chance point blank from the slot, no stakes in the way, absolutely free range, everything shot from there. That was pretty difficult to stop, especially when you're kind of moving laterally like he was because of how quick the pass came through. But obviously that first goal was kind of chaotic, poor turnover, all that different stuff. But I thought he had a pretty solid game. He had a 935 on 5 save percentage. So I think that this ended up being a game that people have been talking all year about how sometimes your goalie needs to steal you a win, sometimes your goalie needs to steal you a win. I would argue that even though the Jets scored 4 goals in this game, you could almost throw that into that category, right? Because you saw how close that margin got near the end of the game. If Connor Hellebuyck's not standing on his head in that third period like he was, this is a game that, the Jets lose, and then everyone turns around and says, sometimes your goalie needs to steal you a game. we never actually give a credit when it happens. We only talk about what he should have done when he doesn't do it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try and correct some of the course that we found ourselves going down. Connor Hellebuyck's my hardest working Jet for this one.
I feel like that's the nature of goaltending. It's like, well, if you give up 5, you got to steal us one eventually, but you win 4-3 in a game where maybe the Jets should have given up more than 3 goals given what transpired, especially in the third period. And you don't really get credit for it because your team scored 4 goals. But it's just kind of the nature of the game, and I definitely agree with that pick. I'm gonna go with Gabe Vilardi, Lyss. One of your guys. I know you have a few on the team, but one of your guys. I will take Gabe Vilardi. I think his season, and I've kind of said this take throughout the year, but I think it's kind of flying under the radar in the grand scheme of the Jet season. Obviously, the success of the team is just kind of diminishing anyone who's having a good year, right? Like it's just, it brings everything down just a level. But for him to be on the top line and be so good, and for the majority of the discourse to be around Connor and Scheifele and not around Vilardi, which fair, Connor and Scheifele put up the big point totals. So does Vilardi, got his 20th of the season tonight, but not as much as Connor and Scheifele. And for him to go down to the second line, still produce with Perfetti and Taves, and maybe be a massive contributing factor as to why those guys turned it around as well in the last 10 games, and the Jets actually had some, semblance of a second line. I think Vilardi was the biggest reason for that. Then he goes back up to the top line tonight, and immediately the top line is clicking like they never left. Vilardi gets a goal. I think he does great work on the wall. I think he does a lot of the dirty work. And I think his season, in the offseason, he just signed a 6-year, $7.5 million contract. And I feel like there's no discourse about it, but I think you feel pretty good about that contract in just year one, given how he's producing, the fact he can produce away from Connor and Scheifele, what he does on the power play, which didn't even shine through in this game, but is still a massive factor for this team. So I'm going to go with Gabe Vilardi for my hardest working Jet tonight. I think tonight's game in particular, he was awesome, but season long, maybe we're not talking about him enough. Maybe we'll have to change.
Well, that means you're not listening to me enough, because I'm always talking about it. But hey, let's get to our next segment, Connor, because I want to pick up right where you left off.
Yes, let's get right to it. We like to give out the hard hat, our eye test award. Let's dive into the numbers now. The standout stat of the game. You said you had something for this that was building off my hardest working Jet. So where are you going with it?
Yeah, well, you brought up Gabe Vilardi, and I think that it's so important to address the fact that, when he was with Connor Scheifele, we were talking about how, unbelievable that top line was and how elite they were, and how, if you don't like watching Winnipeg Jets hockey, it's worth tuning into just to watch that line and everything. And then they split them up because the team was losing even in spite of all that. And all of a sudden there's like new blood being injected into Cole Perfetti and Jonathan Taves, and Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor kind of look not great. And the common denominator in those two lines is Gabe Vilardi, right? Like he flies under the radar for sure, I think, with the way a lot of people talk about this team and its high performers. But now that we have seen kind of a longer stretch of time of the reunion of CSV in this game, playing almost a full 2 periods together, I want to just give you some fun facts about their all situations numbers this year. So power play, 5-on-5, whatever. If you want 5-on-5 numbers, they're very, very similar to what I'm about to tell you, but I like the all situations because they also do kill a ton or defend a lot of, 6-on-5 as a group, whatever. Mm-hmm. Anyways, all that's to say, goals scored this year when Gabe Vilardi, Kyle Connor, and Mark Scheifele are on the ice at all situations. They have scored 64 goals, okay? People talk about how bad they are at defense. They've given up 40. If you want that to be a wider margin, that's fair, but they've scored 64 goals, given up 40. The rest of the team, when Gabe Vilardi and Kyle Connor are not on the ice, Connor, they have scored 55 goals. So those three, when they've been on the ice, the Jets have scored 64. And when none of them are on the ice, they've scored 55. When that top group is on the ice, 40 goals against. When everyone else is on the ice, 80 goals against. So obviously there's a larger amount of time. It's over 1,700 minutes where they're not playing. Whereas the group themselves has less than 700 minutes, so I totally get that. But I just think that we're seeing a reunion of a line that's absolutely electric at their goal scoring. So, and just to give you a quick little update of what their kind of goal percentage is, at just 5-on-5, they scored 40 goals and given up 28. So that's a similar percentage, just over 58% kind of goal share there. And the rest of the team looks pretty similar. So yeah, they score a lot of goals as a trio. So whether you have thoughts, beliefs, whatever about who should be playing with who and the top of the lineup in terms of forwards and wingers, there's no denying that that trio does know how to score.
Yeah, and given what has transpired over the past couple of weeks too, like the Winnipeg Jets weren't scoring a lot of goals as of late. And one of the biggest reasons earlier on when discussing when to break them up was like, oh, well, they're losing all these games anyways. Like, yeah, the top line can score twice a night, but no one else is scoring. Well, it kind of flipped. They broke up the top line and then they weren't scoring. So now I thought it was actually a good time, like you said earlier in the show list, to put them back together, and they rewarded the coaching staff with a great performance. I'm going to go to Elias Salamontan. He's played 5 games with the Jets now since being recalled, and analytically, the numbers look a lot better. And I think the eye test, as we all know and have talked about on basically every single post-game reaction, also looks a lot better for Elias Salamontan. He's over 50% in Corsi, that's shot attempts percentage, down around 44% in actual shots on goal percentage. But again, we're working with a pretty small sample here. 2 goals for, 2 goals against. When he was up here earlier, there weren't many goals for and a lot of goals against. The scoring chances are pretty even. High danger chances 11-7. So the analytics are looking a lot better, and the possession numbers are looking a lot better for Elias Salamontan as he's looking more and more comfortable by the game list, in my opinion. That's going to do it for our standout stat of the game. Lyss, anything else you want to say on this game, or what are you expecting Thursday night when the Jets take on the Lightning? You and I will be back on the post-game reaction for that one as well.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it just for selfish reasons because I freaking love the Tampa Bay Lightning. They are so much fun to watch if you're a hockey fan. They're must-see TV right now. So totally. I'm really looking forward to the game as a whole. But look, this performance, as kind of fun as this game was, I will say it was just a lovely change of pace comparatively to what we saw on Thursday and Saturday against the Panthers
in terms of
and the Red Wings.
In
terms of entertainment value, just the odd man rushes, the turnovers, the chances, fun stuff like that. Yeah. I'm expecting kind of more of that just because the Tampa Bay Lightning have been playing really fun hockey this year as well. But the second part of that, whatever, is that this performance will not cut it against the Tampa Bay Lightning. They are an unbelievably tenacious group, lots of talent, lots of players having kind of career years in terms of their depth guys, and then guys who maybe aren't having career years are, the slums like, Nikita Kucherov or whoever, right. Guys who their baseline is pretty high, right? So I think that there's a lot of players to kind of key into, to watch for, a lot of players who are playing, really important roles. So, going to Amalie Arena, I think, it's important to see how John Cooper's going to try and deploy his guys and what he's going to try and do. If they keep Connor Scheifele-Velarde together, I have a feeling they are going to get some pretty tough, whether it's Brandon Hagel minutes or something else like that, that's going to make their life pretty miserable. So it'll be interesting to see how that works. And if that's the case, if they do any splitting up of the lines once again. And kind of on that same point, I'm curious to see if on paper CSV does take line rushes, they do morning skate, they practice, whatever, what the next line looks like. Does Alex Iafallo stay on the 4th line? Tanner Pearson is the one who got the promo when Alex Iafallo went from 1st to 4th. If that's going to be a more permanent fixture, I wonder how that's going to look for Perfetti and Taves. Have some questions about that, so I guess those will probably be answered a little bit later this week, but that's what I'll be watching for.
Totally. Sorry, I was chuckling as you were talking because I was looking at the Tampa Bay Lightning injury report list, and Charles Edward Dastu, our fan favorite and PDO cast king, is hurt.
No, I'm not even watching anymore on Thursday. You'll be doing the show on your own.
Yeah, but
you know what? JJ Moser and Darren Radish will still be playing. So
you look at this IR thing though, like Braden Point, which is a whole nother. We've been talking about him on the Daily Show because Mark Scheifele. We don't get to watch Sabrin or Hedman or McDonough or Point. But like you said, you scroll up here. Here, let me get off of this screen. But you scroll up and you look at this top line. If the Scheifele line is together, which, by the way, big showcase game against the head coach of Team Canada, if his guy isn't able to go and Braden Point, Mark Scheifele having a 3-point night against Tampa on Thursday wouldn't hurt. But Hagel, Cirelli, Kucherov, I feel like would get the Scheifele matchup. That would be a fun matchup to watch because Hagel and Cirelli both heading to the Olympics for Team Canada, both for their all-around game and their like overall forechecking abilities and defensive abilities and all of those things, and penalty killing that John Cooper trusts them with. So going to be an interesting one on Thursday. Lyss and I will have you covered right here on the WST Postgame Reaction. Thanks for watching this edition of the Postgame Reaction as the Jets defeat the Devils 4-3 In regulation, they get a 1-goal win, and now they continue their road trip against the Tampa Bay Lightning. So from Lyss Houde, I'm Connor Hrabchak. Thanks for watching this edition of the Postgame Reaction. Hit the like button on the way out, and we'll talk to you Thursday night after the Postgame Reaction, and tomorrow, 1 o'clock, right here on Winnipeg Sports Talk.